The Captain Obvious G7 chord is really not obvious. For some amount of time now, I have been calling the G7 chord the Captain Obvious Dominant 7 chord. After all, it is the only dominant 7 chord in music that is all white. It is probably the first chord most music students learn that has 4 notes because it is all white. But what if this simple chord really isn't simple? What if it has so many forms that we can't even count them? What if we are expected to recognize this G7 chord in any one of these forms? Let's examine this idea for a moment. Let's start off with the way students are taught to understand this G7 chord. Here is the root position in its simplest form. But let's think about the fact that even in its simplest form, it can be played in 6 different octaves. Does this root position G7 chord have to have 4 notes? It turns out that when we leave out the note that is known as the 5th, we can still clearly hear it as a G7 chord. This form can also be played in 6 different octaves. But in addition to this root position chord, there are also 3 inversions. All these inversions can be played all over the piano, and that's going to give us many more forms. Now we come to the idea that absolutely blows my mind. We can play at least 16 notes almost at the same time by using pedal. And we can write this same chord in the same way in 4 octaves for full orchestra, so that all of these notes are played at the same time. Finally, we can do something with open voicing that allows us to put spacing into our chords. There are countless ways of doing this. We can add spaces everywhere. It's still the same chord, but the form changes. I'm only going to give you 4 examples, but there are so many possibilities that they might as well be infinite. So much for our simple Captain Obvious G7 chord. We could probably spend at least a year exploring all the different ways of playing this one single chord all over the piano. Now comes the rabbit hole. Advanced pianists have to do this same thing with every kind of chord that exists. Let's consider 5 different 7 chords that every good pianist has to master. There is a major 7 chord, a dominant 7 chord, a minor 7 chord, a half diminished chord, and a diminished 7th chord. All these 7 chords also have unlimited possibilities, and all of them have to be played in 12 different keys. How can students do this? How can they learn to master all these different chords in their almost infinite forms? And how can they recognize all these chords in music so that they can instantly recognize them in whatever they are playing? I think the answer is that they have to get these chords first in their own hands. They have to experiment with them, play with them, explore them, then try to use them in music they compose, arrange, or improvise by themselves. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Leave me comments about anything you like, anything you'd like to see in the future, and remember that I consider all suggestions.